Now it's recording.
All right, so it's recording, but we have no idea if it's actually tracking the audio. So we'll find out later today.
Excellent.
All right, I'll try to stay then closer to the iPad. So this is technically a math class. There's a math prefix. So we should at least do some theoretical math. In the interests of efficiency and maximizing time on the slopes, whatever else you want to do, let's put it all in one lecture. If any of you get excited about any of this and want to talk about it further, absolutely happy to do so. But this is just a chance for you to see where stuff goes. Most of you are probably not going to end up as professional academics, absolutely fine. You will be in fields where you will need to communicate with people. This is a phenomenal opportunity. If somebody sees a class like Legos on your transcript, wait a minute, you got credit for this? This is an opportunity to talk about things. Some of my students who took cryptography, where I encrypted the title on their transcript, led to some very interesting conversations. All right, so a quick overview. We know what the class is about, so I'm not really going to spend too much time on this. Hope this emerges somewhat well. This is actually the top of my wedding cake. This picture might be a little bit better. So just interesting places where you can put Legos and personalize your life a little bit. So anybody recognize what this is?
It's from Star Wars. It's one of those.
You have just failed the class. Try again. You're 50% correct.
It's the Enterprise.
Yes, the Enterprise from Star Trek. There's a huge difference between Star Wars and Star Trek.
It looks like a pod.
Looks like a what?
A pod.
Okay, so if you want to basically say that George Lucas is stealing things from Star Trek, that's fine.
I'll say that.
Okay, then that's acceptable and you're back in the game of past.
Perfect.
Do you know what the purpose of movies are nowadays, movies like Star Wars?
Making money.
Making money, absolutely. It is not about art. And in fact, last year we had Michael Uslan, who owns the copyright for Batman for movies, come to campus and talked about now you have to have at least this many vehicles and at least this many buildings and whatnot that can be converted to toys. So for a lot of the action movies, there's now a huge push for the merchandising aspects. If you've ever seen Spaceballs, the great scene with yogurt, merchandising where the real money from the movie is made. But it's amazing how it impacts things. But one interesting challenge is if you only have a few pieces, what can you build? Can you build something well enough that somebody can recognize it? And it might be only people in a certain class can recognize it. You need to be somewhat familiar with science fiction. Let me just try doing the other lights a little bit and see if that helps a little. If anybody falls asleep, I won't notice. All right, so we've already talked a little bit about plan for the course. The first week was introductions. Right now, all the groups should be getting their times down. Do not tell the other group how well you're doing. The big build is coming up. It's fast approaching. All right, January 25th. So we've had one person who has stepped forward and offered to help coordinate the advertising and publicity. If anybody else would like to help, that would be greatly appreciated. All right. So here's one of the flyers from a couple of years ago when we were doing the Superstar Challenge. Just people trying to have a little fun. For the Superstar build, this was how we designed things. And if you notice, eventually you can tell that there's a mathematician because we have n-30 or n-32 builders. We had a lot of people in the class back then. And we had enough that we could have so many people for different things. For the groups right now, ideally, how many people would you want in your group to have things be built really fast? What would be your ideal number? We're beyond this, it's not going to really help.
5, 6.
So you really think 5 or 6 is optimal? So what you want to do is you want to look at how many dead seconds somebody has. So if somebody's not doing anything for you, that's dead time. So it's going to be hard because if you had more people, you want to be moving them dynamically from place to place. So by adding a person to sort, is that person saving you enough time to be worth it? Can they be doing multiple things? Is it worthwhile to add? Later in the spring, one of my colloquium students is going to give a talk about the museum guarding problem. How many guards should a museum hire? Why does a museum hire guards?
You need to cover every area in the museum, so like be looking at all of the art at all times, make sure no one's touching it or anything.
Okay, good. Make sure no one is touching it or no one is stealing it. Some of the art, I don't think you have to worry too much about stealing, but some of the art is quite valuable. And by putting in security guards, you do decrease the probability of having the art stolen. How much is it worth it to you to prevent the art from being stolen? You're not going to spend $2 million a year to prevent $1 million in thefts. So at some point, adding additional guards does not help. And then what is the optimal arrangement for the guards? If I give you like a polygonal museum, how many guards do you need to guard all the art at all the time? Do you need to have all the art guarded at all the time? What do you think? I saw a no back there. Why don't you need to have the art guarded all the time?
Most valuable pieces.
Well, okay, so if I know that one piece is not guarded, then I might just steal that piece.
Well, because it's not an instantaneous theft, right? Like it'll take some period of time.
So one would hope that it would take some amount of time. Do you want to have your guards have fixed routes?
No.
No. Or you might want to have perturbations about a fixed route. So there's a lot of great mathematics and problems like this. Think about this in terms of airport security, in terms of who gets investigated. These are general life principles. If you have a known system that you use for detection, you're opening yourself up. I've done some work on Benford's law of digit bias. Credit card companies use this to detect account fraud. There was somebody who was caught where if your credit card is stolen, I don't think we've done this in this class yet, what do you do if your credit card is stolen?
Cancel it.
Cancel it. We didn't do that in this class, correct?
No.
Right. So what does the credit card company do now that they hear this card has been stolen?
Wouldn't they cancel all of it?
They would cancel, but let's say there's $15.12 in outstanding charges. Does the credit card company try to track down the thief? No. It's like Bill Gates stopping and picking up a $100 bill.
No, it's
No, at the time. What if there's $58,218? Now it's worth the credit card company time to track down the thief. So there's a certain critical threshold. And there were a lot of credit card companies that had a 5,000 threshold, where anything below 5,000 could be written off without an investigation by the person on the phone. And so what was caught using Benford's law, which is a type of math I do, was this person had their friends take out credit cards from the bank and run out debts just below $5,000 and call up and wait till they got him. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear your credit card was stolen. Don't worry, you're not liable for any of the charges. And they did it too many times. If you do it too many times, you run the risk of being noticed. And they noticed a small little blip of a few too many numbers starting with 4s. So a lot of the stuff we're doing is really just a springboard to applying these ideas to other things in life. So we did a lot of stuff about what would be the right jobs. And for the metric we have here, one of the metrics for who wins is number of seconds times sum of ages in your group. So the more people you add, especially if they're idle, it's going to be bad for your group. If anybody does want first or second graders, and boy, can that be taken out of context, please let me know so we can make sure that you can get all the first and second graders you need. All right. So we've talked about outreach activities, doing a lot of stuff at the elementary school. There was the possibility of doing a Millennium Falcon, but I don't think it's going to arrive in time. If people are interested in movies, especially the new Lego movie, which is coming out in February, I've bought one of the new big sets for that, and we can have an event and then go off and see the movie. All right. So we've talked about grading and whatnot. Everybody should know all this. So I want to now talk to you about real mathematics. So I want to talk about unit analysis, and we've talked a little bit about that in terms of the metric we're going to use for determining winners. Anybody know what bridge this is?
Harvard Bridge.
Excellent. So the purpose of this slide is twofold. One is to segue into the talk, and two, to remind you how valuable captions are. Right? I think I've talked to you about the XKCD caption with people dating. This is one of my favorite XKCD comic strips. I think we should give it another shot. We should break up and I can prove it. And here's a plot of our relations. Maybe you're right. I knew data would convince you. No, I just think I can do better than someone who doesn't label her axes. Whenever you have a plot, please make sure you include axes and labels. Otherwise, you can extremely mislead people. Who here has never seen XKCD? If you've never seen XKCD, if you put your mouse over, it gets additional text. And if you labeled your axes, I can tell you exactly how much better. All right, so this is unit analysis. This is the Harvard Bridge. It's about 620.1 meters. Does anybody know another unit of measurement for the Harvard Bridge?
Is it a schmoot?
It's a schmoot. Yeah. So we don't have fraternities on campus anymore. There are many reasons. One of the reasons is you cannot always trust the activities fraternities do with their pledges. One of the fraternities at MIT decided it would be absolutely essential to know how many smoots long this bridge was. And so they took their pledge and they laid him down and marked off one smoot, and they picked him up and marked down a second smoot and kept going until he went all the way across the bridge. And they measured it to, I love this, 364.1 smoots plus or minus in here. That's the MIT accuracy. MIT and the Cambridge police didn't find this amusing, and they erased the markings. Well, the fraternity would not sit still for this. Hey, Smoot, we need you again. And so they brought Smoot back, and they did it, and this kept going back and forth, and eventually, finally, they said, to hell with it, just leave the Smoot marks there. When there are accidents on this bridge today, they tell you how many smoots down from the end of the bridge the accident happened. Mm-hmm. It is the unit of measurement now. Okay, I didn't include the slide, so I'll just say it over here. Smoot, who is shown over here and here, ended up years later becoming the head of the Bureau of Weights and Standards, or whatever it's called. So it's a very interesting bit where you do not know where things will take you in life. I can just imagine this application. Well, I don't like to brag, but I am a unit of measurement.
Yes, I am Smoot.
I am a Smoot. The only other unit of measurement I know is a Helen. Anybody know what a Helen is? This is a liberal arts college. You should know what a Helen is. Trojan War?
The Hull of Troy?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't know she was a unit of measurement.
According to Isaac Asimov, it is enough beauty to launch 1,000 ships. So he says that a millihelen is probably a more reasonable unit to use in most life situations. Very few people have a unit of measurement named after them. If you look in a math book and you see that your name has become lowercase, an abelian group, you know you've made it. Okay, so here, this is somebody who, it was a college fraternity crank, but eventually he becomes the head of the Bureau of Weights and Standards, or whatever it's called. So here is a Lego set. And these datas that I'm about to show from a few years ago, they might be from like the 2015 iteration. I didn't bother updating. How should we determine the price of this Lego set? What should be going through our minds as we try to set the price?
First factor that comes to mind, to me at least, is number of pieces.
So number of pieces. So the more units I have in terms of my formula, the more complicated things I can take into account. But it's sometimes nice to have something really simple. Just number of pieces. Why might that be bad as just the only factor?
Some pieces are bigger than others.
So some pieces are bigger than others. Some could be more expensive to make.
You're also, sets with the same number of pieces could, most Lego sets are merchandising for one thing or another. And you could be
most Lego sets today are merchandising. Yeah. When I was a kid, the Lego sets were crap. You would not keep anything assembled. So can you guys remember a time before, like Star Wars Lego sets and stuff like that? Okay. So either you have really bad memories, or it goes back so far that you can't remember beforehand. It's like my daughter and the New England Patriots not making the AFC Conference Championship. I know there's some football fans in here. Out of curiosity, did anybody hear about the Wikipedia hack on the AFC Conference Championship page? Somebody hacked the page to say the AFC Conference Championship is the annual event where one team plays the New England Patriots to see who advances to the Super Bowl. It's a very nice hack. But over here, merchandising, absolutely a key part of Lego today. Lego had been losing money for a while. And then Lego made a major decision. And one of their decisions was to start having these specialized merchandise sets. You have Lego Star Wars, Lego Harry Potter, Lego this, Lego that. It's incredible how many things you can now buy out of Legos. And this is good because it excites people who, I like Star Wars, let me buy a Lego stuff. But what's bad for Lego about this? I think you've already mentioned this. Yeah.
So none of the Lego sets that aren't, merchandising aren't those that pay as much attention to them. Okay,
so one thing is this could have an impact on some of the non-merchandised sets. But in terms of the cost of this set, what does the merchandising do?
Increases the cost.
Increases the cost, because now you've got to give money to whoever owns the Star Wars stuff. And so it's a business decision. How much is it worth? I actually don't like this. I think it decreases creativity because you now have sets that are good. You have all these special pieces. People are not going to break them down and play with them. But it's all about money at the end of the day. Any other factors you might want to use in terms of assessing the price? So we've got is it a specialty set? Number of pieces, maybe complexity of pieces.
Is it, production run also? Like, is it a rarer piece and things like that?
Right, so one thing is how common are the pieces? Do I have to set my machines differently for some of these pieces? And there are often severe restrictions on the Lego designers in terms of how many pieces you can use, because they want to keep the cost down. And in fact, I think during the 80s, the designers were going overboard with small specialty pieces that were increasing the cost of sets. So there's a lot of great issues in terms of trying to figure out what the cost should be. You can also relate it to what do you expect the market for this product to be. If it's going to sell a huge number of sets, you can afford to make a smaller profit on each one of them and just make it up in volume. So as a very simple, I did include the picture. They got just switched out of order. Okay. So the slides were stripped. So this is where Sweet was. He was the chairman of the American National Standards Institute from 2001 to 2002 and president of the International Organization for Standardization. Right. And so the slide just got out of order. So this was a 560-piece set, sells for $120, or roughly 21 cents per piece. So CPP is not a bad statistic. It's very similar to if you watch any sports, you want to look at a couple of just key statistics that are just very easy to talk about. For football, what might be a good statistic to talk about for a quarterback? Yeah?
Yards per attempt.
Yards per attempt. What else might be a good statistic?
With that completion percentage.
Completion percentage. So if you had to choose between completion percentage or yards per attempt, which would you rather have?
Yards per attempt.
I'd much rather have yards per attempt. You could complete 100% of your passes, and if they're all passes behind the line of scrimmage, and then the receiver is tackled immediately, it doesn't matter. You want to make sure you get to the statistic that really matters. In World War II, General Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander, had a great piece of writing above his desk. And it said 3 words, win the war. And whenever he got something to do, he would always remember, is this helping me with my objective? My objective is not to do this or that or this. If I can do these things and it can help me win the war, then that's great. But the objective is to win the war. So for a quarterback, yards per attempt to me is a much better statistic than completion percentage. What about the ratio of touchdowns to interceptions?
I mean, it doesn't tell you like the absolute value of points being scored, right? Because you could have 1 and 1, or you could have 100 to 1, but you don't know how many actual touchdowns you're scoring.
Well, right, because you don't know about rushing touchdowns.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I don't like the Patriots, but this past game, Tom Brady didn't throw a touchdown, and he threw 2, was it 1 or 2 interceptions?
2 interceptions.
But they won the game because his other plays made up for it.
Right. And so if you do a lot of passes that get you to the 2-yard line, and then somebody just piles and rushes it in, you don't get credit as the quarterback for throwing the touchdown. So a lot of times people focus on terrible statistics. In baseball, the save is a terrible statistic. And so you really want to think hard in everything in life that you're doing. Am I looking at the right thing? Trust me, marketers and a lot of people will present information in such a way as to influence what you're looking at. When I was in high school, I did a report on acid rain. And there were a lot of studies by Midwestern power utility companies to prove that none of the acid rain hitting New England came from the Midwest. These utilities obviously had an incentive to prove that they weren't responsible. One of the statistics they used is there's a certain compound which is found in the rain in the Midwest, but it's not found in the rain in New England, therefore it can't be from us. And it turns out that this compound precipitates out of rain in like 1 to 2 days, and it takes 2 to 3 days or something like that for the rain to hit New England. So that it's a bad metric. This is not a horrible metric. And a lot of times we want simple metrics that we can just quickly use in conversation. Yards per attempt is a really good metric that we can just quickly talk about. Batting average, there's better things, but it's something that you can quickly talk about and get a sense. So here is the Disney Frozen Castle, 22 pieces, 22 cents per piece. Do you think that this is a reasonable comparison to this? It's about half as many pieces, but they're both heavily merchandised. Now you can argue, is there the same demand for Frozen Legos as there is for Star Wars Legos? That's a much harder question. Here's a couple of other sets. Here's the Superstar Destroyer. This is the one we did a couple of times. In 2015, it was selling for like $600 to $800. So I'm saying now that this is probably 2016 or 2017. It was originally around $450 when I first bought it, when I first started doing this class many years ago. And so the cost per piece is around $19 to $25, going up a little bit because this is one of the collector sets. The London Bridge, 4,295 pieces for $240. It's only 5.6 cents per piece. Why do you think the London Bridge is so much cheaper?
It's not merchandised.
So one is it's not merchandised.
Also, I think probably with larger numbers of pieces, you can probably have a smaller price per.
So definitely the larger it is, economies of scale, and you'll get some savings for that. But this is a little bit over 43. This is about 43 versus about 32.
The Superstar Destroyer looks like it probably has a lot more complex pieces and different things going on.
Yes.
The bridge is kind of just stacked up.
This has a lot of really small brown pieces.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to, this is in my office, and you can see the piece complexity of this set is absurdly low. And they're often smaller pieces. You could also look at maybe the mass of the piece. That for most sets, maybe things average out, but you might have a couple of extreme sets where things are very different. So, possibility for investments. When my brother got married, his friends chipped in and got him the Lego Millennium Falcon. Sadly, he opened it. The unopened box is now worth, as at least it was a few years ago, $6,000. So my brother and I have actually bought some Lego sets. If anybody is interested in investment opportunities, let me know, and I can talk to you about some possibilities. So we decided not to really do anything with this in this course, but another avenue people can go, and if people are interested, happy to do this in the spring, are the Lego ideas. Can you get 10,000 people to support your thing? So there's the old Buck Rogers TV show from the 1970s. I'm assuming nobody has watched that other than myself. Anybody watch the new Battlestar Galactica?
A little bit.
So the new Battlestar Galactica is a remake of the old Battlestar Galactica, which was made at the same time as Buck Rogers. It was the same people, and a lot of the props were the same from the two shows. Your budgets were hard back then. This is definitely aimed at old geeks like me, who would love to have something like that, and you remember that show fondly from their childhood. There's a lot of different things you can look at. I just thought this house was really cool. It looks like it's using pieces in a very clever way to get the way the roof is done. I just thought whoever was doing this is doing something really, really well. Love the use of color. And so if 10,000 people vote for something, Lego will consider having it made. What's nice about this is there's no merchandising fees to pay for. What's difficult about this is it might be hard to get 10,000 people. It might be hard for Lego to say this is worth building. It doesn't quite fit in with their city line. So in 2018, we actually had a group of students who decided to try to do a Lego idea. And they thought a lot about the design and trying to determine price. There were copyright costs, special pieces, the number of pieces, how uniform are the pieces, and what is the audience. In the end, they did some analysis and they looked at price by piece for various sets. And when you put in things over here, you can see the Tower Bridge as a huge outlier. But a lot of the other stuff seems to be following what kind of curve, roughly. If you look at the rest of the points, other than, say, the Tower Bridge, what does it kind of look like?
I think it's coalescing around like 25 cents a piece. Roughly.
Yeah, it does look like there's some kind of linear relationship. And so they tried to do something with very few special pieces. They thought this would be a really good price point to go for. And I'm not going to go too much into their details, but one of the problems is if they're just using physical pieces, it's going to be hard to build something that looks really good. You have to either have a large number of specialty pieces, or you have to use the online automatic designers, which do exist. So I want to talk a little bit about Lego and science. And again, if you're interested, I'm trying to include links to all of these things. The slides are available on the course homepage. So there are a lot of really good scientific questions that come from Legos. So right now I am tentatively planning on writing a book on mathematics and Lego. If anybody is interested in helping to write that, please let me know. There's a lot of opportunities. This is just a case study by the Michigan School of Business, Lego products building customer communities through technology. How many of you have ever done or seen Lego Mindstorm? I believe when this first came out, this is your opportunity to take some Legos and you have some special computers and motors and you can build things and you can program them. Well, as soon as you have something like that, you're going to have some people who are going to hack into the computer. And I heard that at first Lego was upset that people were hacking into their product. And then eventually somebody had to tell them, chill. What is the whole point? Lego means essentially, let's play. These people are having fun, and they don't need mommy or daddy to give them permission to spend hundreds of dollars. This is a good community you want. And Lego had a real dilemma as to did they want to pursue something like this, or did they want to put on serious restrictions? And in the end, they decided, yeah, let's just open things up. Years ago, I can't remember if they were married or if they were just dating, but a couple was in Disney, and she was dressed as a princess, and he was dressed as some other character. And Disney security very quickly went up to them and escorted them off the public walkways. Why do you think Disney escorted them off the public walkways? Yes?
They didn't want to deal with the potential liability or the breaking of the magic, like if they were doing something inappropriate for the character.
Right. Is that they did not want anybody to think, that's the real Cinderella. That's the real Prince Charming. Mm-hmm. Why is Prince Charming drinking 3 Budweisers? They don't want anything like that. Or why did he kick the... They don't want anything like that. They want to control the image very carefully. And so what they said is, no, we're not going to let you walk through. We're going to take you to the gift store. We're going to buy you some clothes on us, with Mickey Mouse or whatever, but we're not going to have you walking through our park dressed as our characters. It was handled extremely well. So another, biocomplexity. So I like the fact that they've included humans on this. This is the optimal cruise speed at sea level versus mass log for organisms and airplanes. And so, not surprising at the end, humans are not selected for powering flight and are far from optimal. Okay? If any of you are able to fly, please let me know. But for most of us, we are not able to fly well. But it's a phenomenal linear relationship on a log-log scale when you look at optimal cruise speed and mass. And the nice thing about a log-log scale is you can see several orders of magnitude very carefully. So this is going from 10 to the minus 4 to 10 to the 8. That's 12 orders of magnitude. Anybody know how far it is roughly from here to, say, Los Angeles? Ballpark. Length of the U.S.
3,000.
3,000 is very reasonable. So 3,000 miles. All right? So 3,000 miles, say. How many feet in a mile?
5,280.
5,280. So this is the number of feet. How many inches in a foot?
12.
Okay, don't you just love the English system? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's only 9 orders of magnitude. We're talking 12 orders of magnitude. So this is essentially talking about measuring something between Boston and Los Angeles to within 100th or 1,000th of an inch. That's the level of accuracy of 10 to the 12. That's just how far of a scale it goes. Okay, phenomenal to see relationships like this across this many orders of magnitude. And then, the papers talk a lot about these different relationships, scaling of differentiation in networks. And so here is a log of the number of Lego pieces in the set, and the log of the number of Lego pieces by type. And again, if you look at the data when it's only on like a semi-log scale, it's not going to look like a linear relationship. But a lot of these power laws become linear. And if you've taken any stats classes, one of the things they teach you is to look at data in different ways to try to see patterns. And doing a logarithmic change of variable often highlights things, or a log-log change of variables. And so over here, I can actually predict things pretty well. If you tell me how many pieces, I have a good idea of how many piece types. And you could look at this also in terms of organisms. As an organism becomes more complex, how many different internal parts and structures do you think it has? So there's lots of different things you could go into. I'm not going to go into all of them here, but I just want to just put a couple of them up. So here is the number of genes versus the logarithm of cell types. And again, you can see phenomenal linear relationships. So there's a lot that you can learn by just looking at these things. What this also tells you is there seem to be some fundamental laws that govern a variety of things. Do you think that people who work with Legos have been looking at maximal cruising? No. But this is one of the things we see in mathematics or in physics, that the same laws emerge and govern many varied situations. Counting on Legos. So this is a picture related to the 2001, yes?
Why do you think that's the case, though?
So this is the general question of universality in science.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a great article by Eugene Wigner, who won the Nobel Prize in Physics probably in the 1960s. And I've actually seen his Nobel Prize on display in Princeton, which is meaningful to me because the work I do is actually inspired by the work he did. And he has a beautiful... Why should mathematics be useful in so many different settings? Why should you be seeing the same thing so many different ways? A lot of it is there just seem to be a couple of universal principles that everything seems to evolve around. So a lot of it in physics is this minimization idea. So any physics people here? So if you look at like the path light takes the path of least time. And so if light passes from one medium to another, the angle of refraction is such that the total time it takes is minimum to get from point A to point B. And you can interpret a lot of physics in terms of this minimization idea. If you have, here, so we have like a little string. If you ask, what curve does it take when you hang it down? Okay, oh here, I can do better. I can do the table. So if I pull this taut, it's not surprising that this is a line. But if I have my hands loose, it's going to take this shape. Does everybody agree that there should be one and only one shape it takes? And that as I vary the points, I should get different shapes. But I shouldn't have two different choices like this. Mm-hmm. There is a way to interpret this in terms of a minimization. I believe it's the minimal surface area swept out as I spin this. And it just turns out this leads to a science called the calculus of variations, where a lot of problems can be solved like this. This question of, let's see, I should be able to get this right. So I have a mass at some point, and I want it to go to another point. And I'm going to build a curve for it to fall down on. And I want to choose the curve that will get it from here to here in the least time. And I believe this is called the Brachystone. And so this was posed by one of the Bernoulli brothers to the scientific community to see who could solve it. And only 3 people gave a correct solution. One, unfortunately for him, was his brother, whom he didn't like at times. Another was L'Hopital, whom you might know from calculus. And the third was an anonymous submission from England. So at the time, the great Sir Isaac Newton was, I think, Chancellor of the Exchequer. And he got the problem, and the story is he devised a new type of mathematics, essentially leading up to the calculus of variations, and sent back the proof anonymously. Given that I have 2 double flashing lights, is it still recording?
It is recording. Yeah. It is not necessarily recording the audio.
Right, so I'm not sure how much of the audio is being captured. So he then sends this anonymous solution back, and the remark that Bernoulli is alleged to have said is, "I recognize the lion by his paw." So going back to this slide, this is how do we count things? So these are 2 mirror images of the same compound. Well, okay, not quite, I guess not the same compound, but it has the same atoms. But they're arranged in a mirror image of each other, and they will have very different properties. So we talked a little bit about this early in the semester. How will I count things like this? And so there's a lot of great counting problems you can do, and I'm going to just give you some links to papers if you're interested. So this over here, hopefully everybody recognizes the Rubik's Cube. If people ever want to learn how to solve the cube, let me know. It takes about an hour. The God number is how many moves it would take God to solve a given Rubik's Cube. So you assume that God will do things as efficiently as possible. And this is a plot of the upper bound and the lower bound of the God's number over time. And this is actually a visualization of one of the configurations that requires 20 moves. And it's now a theorem that no matter how you mix up the cube, it can be solved in 20 moves. And there are 43 quintillion different scrambles, I believe up to symmetry, for the 3x3 cube. So writing it out, that is our number all the way down here. For the 2x2 cube, it's much better. There's only a little bit over 3.6 million configurations. And for each one, that's not so bad that you can't have a computer investigate them all by brute force. You've got to make sure that you really are finding the most efficient way possible, but there's only a finite number of moves you can do. It's not so bad. And it's the God number for the 2x2 cube is 11. It's unknown what the God's number is for 4 and higher. All right, let's go to Legos. So this was a beautiful article. There are about 915 million ways of combining 6 2x4 Lego bricks. So I'm pretty sure I brought some. Yes. So in the interest of time, I will only look at 2 of them. Okay, and we talked that we're always going to assume that they're at right angles, but there were a lot of hidden assumptions about what people meant when they said, how many ways can you combine 6 2x4 bricks? Can anybody think of some of the assumptions that might have been made?
So it does say on the cover there, 6 2x4 Lego bricks of the same color.
Right.
So I think that implies an assumption that any 2 bricks are interchangeable. If you take any given configuration, swap 2 bricks at the same configuration.
Yes. Yeah. So we will assume that all the bricks are the same color. But there was a more fundamental assumption that was made. And so the original number that Lego claimed was wrong.
Probably up to symmetry.
So one question is, do we include symmetry or not? But there's another assumption that was being made. And again, it's very easy to make assumptions and not be aware that you're making assumptions.
I guess that they're all attached to it.
That they're all attached. So one is that they're all attached. Another one is that it was of height 6. We don't have to stack them all the way up to height 6. We could have something of height 2 or 3 or 4. Can't have something of height 1 if they're all attached. And so this is all the different ways of combining up to symmetry 2 2x4 Lego bricks. And then there's a great paper which appeared in one of the top journals in mathematics, experimental mathematics, on investigations of the number of ways to combine Lego bricks. And they have recurrences, and they have upper and lower bounds, they have growth rates, but it gets very hard to find the exact number. And so here, they split things up based on the height. There's this many of height 2, and there's this many of height 6. And I believe this is the number that was often reported by Lego, that there's 102 million ways to do it, because they just assumed you built all the way up to 6. Be very careful about making assumptions. If you are doing science, you should be aware of the OEIS, the Online Encyclopedia of Integer Sequences. Out of curiosity, has anybody here ever worked with an encyclopedia that's not online? Okay, 2 people. 3, I guess I'll put my hand up. When I was in high school, I still had to learn how to use log tables and trig tables to look up things. This is something that's dead, and it's quite fine with me that it's dead. So what you can do is you can input a sequence of numbers, and it will tell you anything it knows that has that as the start. So for instance, if I go, oops. Somebody give me a sequence of numbers.
7, 8, 1, 9, 9, 7.
Is that a real sequence?
That's my birthday, July 8th, 1997.
So I'm expecting that nothing, yes. So something like that is not going to work. Give me a sequence of, no offense, mathematical interest. All right, so if we do 1, do you want to have 2 1s or 1 1?
Let's have 2 1s.
1, 1, 2, 3, 5. So 1,144 results were found. The first one is the Fibonacci's, and it starts giving you formulas, it gives you references, it gives you a huge amount of information about them. And with the Fibonacci's, there's a lot that's known. And then all these references, links, more formulas. I mean, the Fibonacci is a great one. We're still in the first. Okay, here we go. Here's the second one. AN is the number of partitions of n, the partition numbers. It starts 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, not 8. And so it even has your double 1. So if you just give me 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, I don't know if you're thinking Fibonacci, if you're thinking partitions. Well, I do, because you told me the Fibonacci's. So I do know what you're thinking. But if I didn't know that, I couldn't be sure. What I would have to do is gather more data. So this is a phenomenal website in terms of being able to gather data. And so not much is known about this sequence. We don't know that many terms. I think it lists, well, not even 10 terms maybe. All right. Just want to show a few pictures from previous years. We did not do this year because we finally succeeded. I had a dream for many years of building a Lego bridge across Prescott. And so the first year we did it, we did just a little bridge over the mantle because this is being recorded. Williams was very concerned about safety. And so we had our bridge that then allowed us the second year to have a bridge spanning the distance, but just on the ground floor. And then last year we actually were allowed to build the bridge across Prescott. When we were actually constructing it, we had students in safety harnesses. And I had to promise that it would only be freshmen in safety harnesses because the seniors are so close to graduating and becoming alums and being able to donate money back to this great institution. Whereas freshmen, they've been here a couple of months. But we actually had to work with safety experts to make sure that no students were lost. We had to have things cordoned off down below. If a piece fell down, we were not supposed to die for it. But in the end, we were able to span. Now, in stuff like this, we have a huge advantage in that we have the ability to just build around that, and that can take a lot of pull. If you look at the first bridge over here, you can see that this is anchored going down. You could see the tower being pulled in both sides towards each other. And the students learned too late that if we were ever to do this again, do not build the towers straight up, but rather build the towers at an angle so that as you get the force pulling them together, it would actually straighten them out. Anybody know, I think it's called the Blackbird, one of the fastest planes in the US fleet? Has anybody heard of the Blackbird? Mm-hmm. I believe it travels extremely fast, and when it's traveling, parts of it heat up and expand. And so there are actually little gaps between things when the plane is at rest, because they know when it's traveling it's going to expand and fill that up. And they want to make sure that there's not too much pressure on it. So you really have to take into account a lot of forces in designing something like this. All right. There's a bunch of mathematical topics. I'm not going to go through these. If anybody's ever interested in any of these, I am happy to talk about them in greater detail. By just going like this, you can always hit pause or just look at the slides. These were just other suggestions people had for Lego ideas. And I will end with the following. So this is from 2012, I think? I'm not sure. This was the first Superstar build. We never got a good camera angle for all of this. And so for the challenge for this Friday, one of the things to think about is, who can we get to come in and videotape this? You always have to put in cheesy music. So this is about 10 minutes to build the whole set. And you can notice basically no instructions, except a little bit over here, a little bit over there, but most of the people have this stuff memorized. The sad thing is you can't see the other tables where things are being done as well. Anybody know why it was a world record?
First ever.
Yeah, first ever attempt, yeah, with this many people. So if you want to create a world record, step one is to create a category where you have a really good chance. And so the more people you put in, the easier it's going to be. I've seen attempts of 5 people, and I think 5 people doing it in about 90 minutes. Now, with the number of people we had, there were huge amounts of time where people were idle, where we just did not have things for people to do. And so it's a really interesting question. And I think the build time is the wrong statistic. It's got to be something related to build time times number of people. And you can't have somebody come in and come out. So for instance, I'm only going to use you for 2 minutes and then you're done and you're no longer counting against us. No. If you are hired, you have to be used for the whole time. There's an issue like that with the Children's Center at Williams College right now. So this is probably not applicable to any of you right now, which is a good thing. But eventually, if you have children, you may be interested in daycare. And so people do not always have children at the most opportune time based on the calendars of when daycare is provided. So your contracts are often an entire year contract. Let's say the contracts start in August or September, when the school year begins. But your baby is not going to be old enough to go until December. Or maybe you want to keep the baby home for a little bit and not be ready till January. Well, a lot of times people like to have a job for an entire year and not a job just for a couple of months. That if you are hiring somebody, they need to start at the right time. So frequently daycares split essentially the difference. Say, look, we have other people who would want this space. You have a higher priority. What we'll do is we will pay for half the cost, and you pay for half the cost of the months when your child is not enrolled, and that will reserve the space for you. And then there are then very interesting questions as to what's the correct formula to use, what's the correct split. If nobody else wants the space, and you already have so many teachers that putting in an extra kid later is not going to cost you more money by having to add another having to add another teacher, that's one thing. But what if you're already at capacity? And having that extra kid added means you have to hire an entirely new teacher, because there are rules by the states as to how many kids can be in a room per teacher. For infants, it's basically 3 kids per 1 teacher. So it can be very expensive for a daycare to add 1 more kid. But it's also a huge service to the community. If you want the professors, if you want the staff members to be available for meetings, they often need to have care for their child. I'm a elected official in school districts. A lot of times schools will allow kids to transfer in from other districts. And if you have a classroom that can take 22 kids and it's at 17, sure. It's very easy to say, let's bring in another kid or 2 or 3. But if you're already at 22 kids and putting in 1 more kid means you now have to hire a new teacher and open up a second section and go from 1 class of 22, now let's say we add 4 kids and go up to 26 and go to 2 classes of 13, it may not be worth it. And you have to really decide what's right for your district. So there's a lot of really good mathematics related to all of this. So this is the one lecture throughout the semester where the goal is to just show you a little bit where all this goes. If any of you are interested in working on a chapter in the book, let me know. It has a green light approval from a major publishing house. If you are not seniors, there is even the possibility of creating an independent study to do this next year and have this as a writing intensive class. So, any questions on this part right now? All right, I'm going to hit stop.